mechanic in the Air Force working on jet engines. But when I tried to contact my old Air Force buddies, people that I worked with and partied with, they didn't even know me. I have memories of Montauk, and I believe that Montauk was never really shut down.
Is Al Bielek the sole surviving member of a markedly successful but incredibly tragic experiment?
If Montauk was shut down in 1983, did the government just abandon space-time research? Or will the ghost of the Eldridge come back to haunt us again in the 21st century? There's still a huge void between what we know and what we'd like to know. That the Montauk Laboratory existed is not in dispute. It is in fact still there today. The project itself, however, appears to have been shut down in the mid-1980s. Could that have merely been a ruse to give them time to rebuild and update the facility? Is it possible that the Phoenix Project, under some other guise and in some other place, is still going on? Are terms like hyperspace, the space-time continuum, and the time travel paradox seriously discussed in clandestine scientific circles, or are they just the stuff science fiction is made of?
You can be sure there's a lot of research taking place in the field of quantum physics and parallel realities and hyperspace. We're not talking about length, width, height, and time here. We're talking about actual parallel reference frames, parallel realities, different dimensions, different universes to us. There is data and theories that suggest we have possibly 21 realities or reference frames wrapped up in the existence we know. There is nothing more important to quantum physicists than studying how all these different reference frames interrelate to each other.
But doesn't this go far beyond the idea of radar or even optical invisibility? Was the Philadelphia experiment a research accident, or was it the means to an end?
Later on, Duncan and some of the others saw the project as pure evil and wanted to destroy it. But Dr. von Neumann, who, by the way, did not die in the 50s, wanted to keep it. He thought that it was a valuable research tool that would be essential in combating what he saw as very serious threats to the security of the United States in the future.
But research into what, and at what cost? Could it be that the Eldridge and its crew were not the only U.S. military personnel to run afoul of the Philadelphia experiment? Encounters has recently learned that investigators now believe yet another experiment was launched using the same technology. But this time, instead of naval vessels, the subject of the experiment was aircraft. For over 40 years, the disappearance of Flight 19 from a Fort Lauderdale air base in the mid-1940s has been written off as just another of the many Bermuda Triangle anomalies. But now a German historian and investigative journalist, Michael Preisinger, has uncovered information never before published in the U.S., suggesting a different explanation.
One of my sources, who uses the name Joe Smith, which I'm certain is not his real name, provided me with copies of documents that tell a chilling story. Following the disastrous results aboard the USS Eldridge, the Navy decided to proceed, but with much smaller objects. Their first project would be an attempt to create fog banks that aircraft could slip into following an attack and disappear from view. The Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber was chosen for the first experiment, which was dubbed Burning Glass. But when the equipment arrived at the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, where the experiment was to take place, it was discovered that it was too big to fit in the torpedo bay. It would have to go into the rear gunner's cockpit.
That meant that when the equipment was reconfigured and put aboard the lead aircraft, one crewman would have to be left behind. When the flight took off on December 4th, 1945, Corporal Alan Cosner did not go up. That much at least is well established.
The flight had proceeded from Fort Lauderdale to Chicken Shoals and had made their turn for the return when Captain Charles Taylor activated Burning Glass. According to my informant, instead of creating a fog bank, a mini wormhole opened up just ahead of the planes. Within seconds, they were thrown out of time and dimension, vanishing into an infinite eternity.
What could have been the purpose of the Navy's continuing research? The war was over when Flight 19 disappeared. Could it be the equipment was never designed for creating camouflage at all, but something far more sophisticated? Something that might one day aid in interstellar travel? To the average person, all of this sounds nothing short of preposterous. Someone once said 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Could the government have actually kept all of this under wraps for nearly half a century? Short of the Navy throwing open the doors of the Montauk installation or giving serious journalists access to all of their World War II research files, there doesn't seem to be any way of corroborating Carl Allen's letters to Morris K. Jessup or Al Bielik's incredible memories. If past government responses to questions that touch on UFOs is any indication, nobody will see the inside of Montauk or the Navy files anytime soon. But could there be a more rational explanation for all of this? Let's go back to that newspaper article Allen referred to for a moment.
Several city police officers responding to a call to aid members of the Navy Shore Patrol in breaking up a tavern brawl near the U.S. Navy docks here last night got something of a surprise when they arrived on the scene to find the place empty of customers. The Shore Patrol arrived first and cleared the place out, but not before 2 of the sailors involved allegedly did a disappearing act. They just sort of vanished into thin air, right there, reported one of the frightened hostesses, and she added, "I ain't been drinking neither."
But there is another version of this story. A man by the name of Edward Dudgeon claims to have been there, and he gave a very different account. In fact, Dudgeon says he was one of the 2 sailors who were supposed to have disappeared. It's not very complicated. A couple of sailors were bragging about new equipment on their ship, and someone told them to shut up, and a fight broke out. That would explain the sailor's disappearance. But what about the ship itself?
According to an interview that Jacques Vallée conducted with Edward Dudgeon, who was a witness on the USS Engstrom, which was a ship right next to the Eldridge pulled out of harbor that night at 11 p.m. And it was also back in Philadelphia harbor the next morning, which seems impossible. But if you look at the map, you'll see that merchant ships would have taken 2 days to make the trip, going around submarine nets, mines, and so on. But the Navy used a special inland channel, the Chesapeake-Delaware Canal, that bypassed all that. Well, Dudgeon claimed that the Eldridge made that trip in about 6 hours.
Is this the sort of mundane stuff legends grow out of? Did Carl Allen make it all up? Is there any reason to believe Al Bielik's incredible story? More importantly, does the government use its citizens, particularly the military, to test new technologies and especially new weapons?
In September of 1977, during the Joint Attack Weapons System test, a UFO was reported at Fort Benning, Georgia. This was not your average every day we watched until it flew away kind of sighting. If the reports are accurate, and I believe they are, the Army at Fort Benning actually went to war with an alien spaceship.
I have just arrived at the 1st Battalion Post, Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was assigned to Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Infantry.
On Tuesday night, about 10:30, all the lights in the camp began to flicker on and off, almost like a strobe light. This was highly unusual, and Vasquez, along with the other soldiers, decided to arm themselves.
The whole battalion was moving away from the 1st Battalion Post when we saw lights coming up the road. It was a general, the gunner, and a driver in a jeep. I thought the problem was electrical, but the general ordered us to move down the road just in case. Then a bright searchlight scanned across us from behind the trees. I thought this was some kind of military test, but I never seen anything like this. Alpha and Bravo Company ran across the field and drew fire. It wasn't tracers, but small balls of white lights hitting the men. I was firing my M16 into the tree line, and I could hear my bullets hitting something. But it had no effect. Those balls of white lights kept on coming.
What was it that Private Vasquez, the soldiers of Delta Company, and the helicopter were all shooting at that night? Were they under attack from an alien spaceship, or could it have been something else?
I sent Dr. Stephen Greer, director of Sea City, a report of what happened at Fort Benning. His best guess is that this was some kind of exotic defense system used for mind control. He thought that my company was involved in some kind of psychological warfare test.
Lost or altered memories, time travels, and battles with mysterious unknown enemies. Are we the target of some sinister alien force? Or are we just being used as unwitting guinea pigs for secret projects designed by mysterious entities who think they know what's best for us? Could it in fact be some sort of conspiracy? Perhaps the question we should be asking is, has anything good come out of all of this?